3.
Welcome into Personal Communication class and guests. Today I will be speaking about language barriers, how they affect our communication with others, and how we can avoid them. According to skillsyouneed.com, in most communications, messages aren't normally received and understood the way the speaker wants it to be. I found this topic interesting because of past conversations. I realized I struggled a lot getting my point across because I used terms that not everybody knew about and people were simply misled. 3 barriers that can cause communication to be less effective are bypassing, slang, and exclusionary language. So what are these barriers? How does it affect our communication with others, and how can we avoid them? The first thing I will speak about is bypassing. From Think Communications textbook, bypassing is a form of miscommunication where people miss each other with their meanings. Examples are the words bat or pig or anything with more than one meaning. Anything with more than one meaning weakens communication because words like these can cause confusion. When people are thinking of different things, they're misled and the conversation is more complicated. So if I were to say the bat is in the garage to somebody, the person I'm telling it to will be confused because they don't know if I mean an actual baseball bat or the animal. And that's where the miscommunication occurs. We can avoid this by using simple vocabulary and staying away from words that create bypassing, unless you clarify what you're saying, which not everybody wants to do because they just want to get their point across very simply. And you can't always assume that everybody will know what you're saying because that's where the misunderstandings occur. Now that I spoke about bypassing, I'm going to speak about slang. So what is slang? The communication textbook states that it consists of informal, non-standard phrases that tend to originate in subcultures within a society. It can cause people to feel left out, and that's because someone may not know what a term means. Just like bypassing, you can't assume that everyone will know what you know because it will cause miscommunication. Also, terms can be misused when you're around people who can know it as something else, meaning if they've heard of that word but they don't understand it the way that you do because they've learned it as something else. So when my mom came home from work one day, I simply asked her if she had any tea. In my generation, when people use the word tea, we normally mean, does that person have any gossip or anything to talk about? So obviously my mom didn't know what that meant, and she looked at me kind of funny because she knows I hate drinking tea. So she said that the tea was in the pantry to go and get one if I wanted. I looked at her very funny too until I realized that she didn't know what I meant. And that's where the miscommunication occurred because she thought I simply meant drinking tea when I just meant gossip. So how can you avoid this? Well, smallbusinesscron.com says to observe your surroundings and listen to terms that are being commonly used, and make sure you realize who you're speaking to. Because you don't want to speak to an adult and use slang because for the most part they might not understand what you're saying, and that's where miscommunication occurs. So if you're speaking to an adult, stay away from terms that they probably won't get. If you want to get your point across very efficiently, use common terms that you know everybody for the most part will understand. However, if you do use slang, just make sure you clarify what you mean so the other person is not left in the shadows and not understanding what you're saying. Now we move on to our last language barrier, which is exclusionary language. So what is it? The communication textbook states that it uses words that reinforces stereotypes, belittles people, or excludes others from an understanding of an in-group message. Along with bypassing and slang, exclusionary language makes people feel left out. This can be very intentional and very offensive. People use very crucial words based on others' race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, etc. And people begin to label others creating division amongst everyone. So if people are constantly being excluded and not addressed, it can hurt others, and that's something you don't want. So how can you avoid this? Well, when you speak, use words that include everybody, not simply picking out a particular type of person and saying, oh, them, we don't talk to people like that. You want to include everybody. And don't use terms that are offensive that can hurt feelings, because it will cause problems. Use terms that are appropriate when speaking about people who are different from you. For example, if somebody is physically challenged, you don't want to use a term that's offensive. You want to use something that's more appropriate. So now that I've spoken about everything, I will come to an end. Although these aren't all the language barriers that can affect communication, they are just a few. We have bypassing, where people miss each other with their meanings, slang that consists of informal and non-standard terms or phrases from a specific area, and exclusionary language that belittles others. No one wants to feel misunderstood or belittled, so avoiding these language barriers will cause better communications with others. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.